All right. So how fair discrimination and how people define it is basically discrimination against a person if they deserve it, if they deserve to get discriminated based on something like they did. Uh, is it a good thing? I guess in situations it can, but in other situations, like we can see in South Africa, in the case we're dealing with Mr. Peter the Jager, it's abused to say that it's used to demonize a group instead of an individual. They demonize a group's actions instead of the individual's actions. Now, Mr. Peter the Jager did nothing wrong, but how South Africa sees is like his race did this thing, and because he did this thing, they have to pay back. And that idea is like it's not really good for society because then we're just putting people into groups instead of seeing them as an individual. And those are my thoughts.
Okay, very good. Michaela, what do you have to say? Michaela. Yeah, you can come here. No, you don't have to read. You can just tell me what you think. You can come over here if you want to. Okay, well, that's fine. Okay, let's go ahead with Noel. Noel, let's go ahead. And what do you think?
So what I think about fair discrimination, I just think unfair, fair discrimination, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, discrimination is discrimination. Right? You're just discriminating. Implementing things that will affect people negatively, put them in, not give them equal opportunities, as we're seeing in the case that we studied of Dr. Peter the Jager. To give somebody a quote unquote equal opportunity, you're giving somebody else no chance at all. So you're discriminating against because of who they, who you associate them with, their racial groups. And that just isn't fair in any way, shape, or form. You see it as fair discrimination because it's fair, giving somebody an equal opportunity, and then you're giving somebody else no opportunity at all, and that just isn't fair. And you can't have both. I mean, you can't have unfair and fair and just say it's okay, because it's, at the end of the day, as I said, it's just discrimination, and that's my thought on quote unquote fair discrimination.
Okay, good. Mackenzie?
I agree with Noel. I really don't think like there's such thing as fair discrimination. At the end of the day, it's just discrimination.
Well, can we all agree that what happened to people in South Africa from 48 to 94, can we all agree that was bad?
Yeah, that was bad, but now they're just reversing roles.
Yeah, and by reversing roles, what's going to end up happening 100 years from now?
They're going to have to just reverse roles once again to make up for these wrongs that they're doing to the whites.
Yeah. So when you think about it, how does this apply to like even people in our country? Mackenzie, go ahead. You're going to say something?
Oh, my internet cut out, so I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, I was wondering how does it apply to people like in our country today? I'm sorry, my phone's stuck on from before. Okay. When you look at race in the United States, are we okay? This sounds weird, but back when we had the civil rights movement in the 1960s, I think we all can agree that things were not really good. And I always remember the quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. about judging people by the color of your character. I mean, the content of the character, not the color of your skin. But today we've gone to judging people by the color of their skin. Have we really improved in race or not? We look at South Africa and say, well, that happens in South Africa, but what can we apply here in the States? Michaela, what do you think? How's race relations here in the States better, worse, you think, today than it was before?
I think it's kind of the same, but it's more like modernized.
Okay, explain.
There's not like there's not like, you know, the signs that they would have, like segregation signs and stuff. It's not as blatant as it was, but like it's, you can tell it's still there. And like being a Black person in America, like you'll feel it more than anyone else can feel it because you experience since you're born.
Now, you being a young woman growing up in the United States today, what are some of your concerns for race in the future? What are you concerned about racism today? Be as honest as you can. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, like, I don't really know what to say about it because, like, I mean, I've experienced it, and I feel like every Black person in America is going to experience it. And I feel like you're just going to be one of those lucky people if you don't experience it because it's literally everywhere in America. And it's so, like, kind of normalized that people don't even get it. Like, cultural, like, the difference between cultural appreciation and appropriation, like, stuff like that. And,
can you share with us at all how you might experience it? Anything that's not too sensitive or anything?
Oh, like something that I've experienced before.
Because I mean, we may not know, so we're trying to find.
I'm trying to think of something I can talk about in school.
Have you ever had anything in school, opportunities or anything that held against you? You could share, maybe.
I don't think that there's been so many times, but I mean, like a lot of the topics that I don't really feel comfortable talking about. So I'll say one. When me and my mom, my uncle, we were driving to Georgia, and my uncle's tent, like it was like too dark or something, and we got pulled over. Meanwhile, there was like hundreds of people like speeding, but we got pulled over, and the cop comes to my uncle's car, and he asked my uncle, "Do you have a body in the trunk?" And he was like, "Do you have drugs in the car?" and stuff like that. My uncle was like, "No." And he was like, "If I check right now, what will happen?" And then he made my mom come sit in the car, questioning her a bunch. Meanwhile, we didn't do anything really wrong. We just had dark tints, and it went to something huge. And I felt like that was racist because all these situations going on, and you're worried about us, and we're all Black, you know?
Mm-hmm. So here in the United States, there's a good example of being treated differently because you are African American.
Yeah.
And were the officers African American?
No, the officer was white.
Okay, so the officer was white, so you have a major difference there. Thank you so much for sharing, Mackenzie. Noel, what are your concerns growing up here in the United States for yourself, or maybe your family, or the future, or whatever?
On the if race is a big deal now,
Yeah.
Here, I just like to say that I actually do think that it's become a bigger deal than before. I get that before it was bad. But I do think that racism plays a big role in our everyday lives now. You know, as we looked into CRT, now we implement it in our everyday lives because if something happens or like just every day, like how CRT explains in our everyday lives, if anything happens, now we look at race. Now we try to see if I do agree that things happen to us. I've experienced it and stuff like that. But that just shows how much more race is now than it was before. Like now we're seeing things happen to us, and now we're thinking, okay, so this was because of my race, and it's true. Things can happen to you because of your race. Things have happened to me because of my race.
But you never thought of it until now, more that it was race, correct?
Right. And that so you asking if race is a bigger deal now than it was before. I do think now our races affect us every day in how we're thinking of, how our interactions happen. And it just becomes a big role in our lives now. So I do think that race has become a bigger deal than it was before. Back, like how you said, maybe 100 years ago or 50 years ago. But I do think that like race plays a big role now. We see it as bigger than it was before. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. But personally, I have experienced things, for being like Hispanic, just looks. Opportunities. I think I have fair opportunities, like along with anybody going to DV. I've never been denied any opportunities, but you know, just like at stores or if you're, you know, in a neighborhood or something, the comments there is that like, you know, that you get looked at. But like opportunities wise, I think I've been given the same opportunities as any white person in DV, any colored person in DV. I think we all get the same opportunities. Now in the real world, that may be different, but up to now, going to DV my whole life, I have had equal opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Mikhail.
I think in this generation, there's more like gaslighting type things because like it's like if I were to speak out about like racist things that I've gone through, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, you're making this about race," and they would just like try to like tear you down and be like, "Oh, well, you're racist because you're making this about race. It wasn't about race and all this stuff." And it's like I feel like that's gaslighting and like manipulation to like put colored people down when we actually speak out about things.
Well,
I feel like that's gaslighting.
Yeah, it could be, but what Noel was saying earlier is that we never really thought of being a race. You know, in other words, could you have a difference of opinion with somebody without being racial? You see what I'm saying? So we may come from different backgrounds, and we could have a different opinion, and we could be different races, but not necessarily mean it's racial. I think what he was saying is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Noel, we jumped to this as first think as racial now. Is that what you're saying?
What I was just trying to say is just about your question if we see race as a bigger thing now. I was just saying that, we look at race now in every our interactions because it does, you know, it does affect our interactions. I do agree with Michaela saying that it does play a big role. I agree with that. So race is a bigger deal now than it was before because it does affect your interactions. Especially depending on your race, it does affect you and your everyday interactions. And so that's why it's become a bigger deal in our everyday lives.
Okay, going back to the South African case, do you think that Peter de Jager was he discriminated against because he was white?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, do you think if he had been African, if he had been black African, that he would not have been discriminated against?
I think he wouldn't have been discriminated against because in South Africa they have the affirmative action. So then affirmative action would have been on his side, and he would have gotten the job as Dr. O did.
Yeah, and Dr. O gets a job, and he gets benefited by that, but he's not even a South African subject, so that's kind of interesting too. So, I mean, there's a couple things going in that case that are kind of strange. Christoph, what do you think about discrimination and the role and everything?
Well, I don't think. I think race is a huge issue today. It's not because it really is. It's because our society has made it. We made everything about race. We made all the problems in our society, and we blame it on race. And I don't think that's a healthy way to move on. Unless the situation actually has to do about race, then it's fair to acknowledge it. But if it doesn't, then not really. Like politicians have said, like climate change has started because of racism in America, which really has nothing to do with the situation. It's really, people like to focus on race because they feel like if they do, they'll get to the problem. And sure, that I don't mind that, but still, it's not a really good way to move forward. We're moving back. We're not moving forward.
Okay. So if you were in charge, what would you do differently?
Excuse me?
If you were in charge, what would you do differently?
A whole bunch of things. But one thing I would do is basically, I guess if I was in charge of the education system, I would like teach people not to basically blame everything on race or blame everything on others, because what everyone likes to do is basically blame the problems on everything else but themselves. And I would like to teach people self-acknowledgement, to make people acknowledge if they are the cause or they have any contributions to the problem. And I think that's a good way to move on and grow a society.
Do you think that we'd be benefited if we just taught there's only one race, the human race, and not to look at different skin pigmentations?
Yes and no. It depends on the situation. If we're acknowledging problems, like if we're saying, "Oh, we want to have help specific communities, and so they can be like everyone else in America," then I guess it's okay to acknowledge race and culture and all that. But generally, no. We see each other when encountering each other as equals, as human beings, and only judge one another based on character.
Going back to South Africa real quickly, could you have equality like they asked for and still define it by races, or do you have to treat everybody as the same race to have equality?
Well, first of all, the situation in South Africa is not really equality. Equality is basically equal opportunity. And in South Africa, we don't have the equal opportunity. It's basically, how can I say, taking turns. For like, there's going to be a century, this class is going to be oppressed, and this class is going to be good, and the other, it's going to go back and forth, back and forth. And that's not really good for society, because if we continue to do that, well, who knows what we might end up. We're going to put ourselves against each other. We're going to make ourselves even more mad at each other than we already are.
Yeah, you see a relationship when you see continual warfare. You know, if you're having feuds, you're having war, and you're always going against the enemy, the wars never end. You know, that's why we had 100 Years' War instead of whatever. You can see it. It goes beyond generations. People die, the next generation picks up and goes the same way. Mackenzie, what do you feel like?
About racism in America?
Yeah.
I feel like it is very prominent. And I agree with Noelle and Michaela. And though personally I will never experience it, I feel like I've seen it happen to others. And I wish that it was something that didn't happen, but I know that it will always be something that will happen. And I think I know some people think that racism isn't a thing in America, but I feel like if they think that they really just need to open their eyes, because it's everywhere. It's not just in America, it's everywhere. And it's not something that you can deny and say that it's not there, because it is.
Yeah, I think every country is going to be a little bit differently because of the different makeups of people, but racism is kind of like the giant elephant in the room. You know, nobody really wants to talk about it, but yet it's still there, and it impacts people greatly. You know, we probably couldn't even have this conversation in some countries. They wouldn't allow you to do it. So at least being able to have the conversation. Why is it important to have conversation like this, Michaela?
Because it's very normalized, so people just disregard it and think that, oh, it's just a certain person, because not enough people are speaking up about it until now. So because people are speaking up about it now and they didn't earlier, people are like, oh, why are people just saying this now? They must be just making it up. Because I actually know it is like Mackenzie said, it is normalized all around the world. Because I have a friend and her mom is from Germany and she's Black. She was telling me the other day about how when she was in elementary in Germany, they would sing this song in front of everyone. It's called 10 Little N-Words, like the N-word with the harder R. And they changed that from that to 10 Little Monkeys Jumping on the Bed. That's where that originates from. It's just little stuff like that. And she would have to sing that with her classmates out loud in front of all these white kids and thinking it's funny to make fun of Black people. And it was just normalized.
Yeah. And then, we could go tomorrow. We're going to talk about religions, but we're going to talk about that in a second too. So it could be race, it could be religion, it could be the way you look. It could even be different colors of your skin. Noelle, explain to people that may not know what kind of difficulties do Hispanic people have here in the United States? Or discrimination? I mean, how can a Hispanic be
well, like, you know, obviously Hispanics, they might not. I know people, friends that are from here, but their parents speak Spanish. So growing up, they learn Spanish first, and then once they start learning English, they have that strong accent. You know, and then they're discriminated against because they have that accent, so you can't understand them that well. And then I also have people that are discriminated against because they only speak Spanish and they don't speak English. And it's like the common saying, we're in America, speak English, but we don't have an official language. So then that discrimination just, it has no logic behind it if there is no actual official language here. To discriminate against someone because they don't speak a specific language just doesn't make sense, but it does happen. I mean, I've seen it happen before. You know, you go to a store, they don't understand you, and they're like, "I'm sorry, I don't know," and then you don't get any help, or it's like,
yeah,
that just isn't fair. I do understand that, you know, we're taught English, but that doesn't mean that it's the official language. That doesn't mean that it's okay to discriminate against someone because they don't understand it, because they don't speak it. And that's the kind of discrimination that I've seen, that language barrier. That's the discrimination that I've seen the most, not speaking or understanding English.
Now, Christoph, if somebody comes up to you in the store and starts speaking Spanish to you, what do you say?
Well, I speak a little bit of Spanish, but if I didn't know, I would try to find someone else that speaks Spanish better than I do, or someone that can understand them.
Yeah, but I think what Noel is saying is kind of really bad, because I've seen somebody get scolded simply because they have, you know, a Hispanic or Hispanic background and they don't speak Spanish. If somebody comes up to you and starts speaking Spanish and you don't know what they're saying, you know, they start saying, "How come you don't do this?" So I've actually seen people tear apart other people of the same, you know, persuasion simply because of perception. So, or you might want to say, like here in the States, a lot of times we have a lot of people who come here without immigration papers and stuff. So a lot of times they think everybody who's Hispanic doesn't have documentation. It's not true, because we've had people here in Texas that were, many of our founding fathers of Texas were actually Texicans, which were actually Mexicans before they were United States. So we've had a long history of people giving up their life for our state or our country before it was a state that were from Mexico. So, you know, that's kind of weird. I'm sorry, Michaela, you were going to say something?
Oh, yeah. I was just saying how I've actually noticed that in schools too. I've had multiple teachers who have literally told their students that, "Do not talk Spanish in my class. You only need to speak English," because the teachers would automatically assume that the students, just because the students were talking Spanish in our class, that they were talking like bad about the teacher, or they were cussing and stuff like that. Like just automatically assuming that they were using their what is it called when you know a whole bunch of languages?
Multilingual
abilities for like bad, instead of, "Oh, I'm just speaking Spanish to my Spanish friend. Why is that a problem to you?" I've seen that so much.
Well, I hate to tell you this, Michaela, but I've been in education for 35 years. It wasn't until probably about 20 years ago, but many of your parents, if they grew up here in Texas, you would get a paddle or a corporal punishment if you spoke Spanish in school. So, you know, literally you would be physically punished. You would get a lick or 2 licks or 3 licks if you even mentioned Spanish in school, for almost the same reason Michaela said. So, and then that is, it's very difficult. I guess if you came from Nigeria or Ethiopia or other countries, if you spoke a different language, but here in Texas, they were very much against trying to teach any kind of Spanish. So, I mean, I've seen students actually get corporal punishment for nothing more than speaking Spanish. And that's, you know, that at least has changed somewhat, you know.
It's like, I feel like for America and school systems, it's such a problem if you're not whitewashed. Like you have to speak Spanish, you have to have your hair look a certain way. Like a lot of people have been sent home for wearing colored box braids, which is a cultural thing, or you don't get a job because your hair is in a big curly afro and your hair is not straightened, stuff like that, because you're wearing your Mexican or African culture like clothing, and you get disregarded for a job just because of that. It's like you have to be so like whitewashed in America to actually get far, and I don't like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably going to be changing a lot. There's less and less people in your generation. It may be some better. I don't know. Yeah, but like Noel says, I'm just worried about future generations, like your grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so on. As our generations pass on and your generations become the leaders, I hope we just keep on stirring up the same pot. You know, that is the largest problem. You know, it's kind of weird, but you know, Martin Luther King Jr., when you really think about his speech, "I Had the Dream," which is really amazing speech. I mean, at the time, it was on all TV channels, and he just decided to come with that repetitive tone, "I have a dream." Of course, he's a minister, and he does it in the kind of a chanting of the Protestant church, and it was very effective. But when he comes up with that speech part where he says, "I judge by the content of the character, not the color of your skin," he was 60, 70, 80 years ahead of what a lot of the people were talking about, because people just saw people strictly by the color of their skin and not what they could do. You know, this is we're really limiting people if all we do is just look at what the color of skin is, because that doesn't really get to their heart or soul or anything else. I think all you guys are much better off than at least I was when I was growing up, or the people of my generation or my parents' generation. It's gotten some better here in America. Not the best, but it's gotten some better. I don't say the same probably in South Africa. You know, in South Africa, it went flip-flop from one side to another side, and it's just as bad. Does that mean it could be better? Oh, yeah, it could be a lot better. If we had this conversation with other parts of the world, it's really amazing. I mean, you would be totally shocked or surprised that racism is in almost every country. And then people that you think look to be the same race. We go to some Middle Eastern countries. If you belong to one tribe of people, it's more tribal. So if you belong to one group of people and your family's been in that group for 2,000 years, and you married cousins or whatever, all through 2,000 years, you stayed in that same area, and somebody 10 miles down the road that you didn't have any interaction with is a hated person, and it's still that way today. So, I mean, we are much better than that, but it's getting really bad. Okay, so tomorrow we will be doing the deal live from at 7. If y'all want to tune in, I'll send you another link. Hopefully everything will work out. Then at 8 o'clock, we'll go to the YouTube. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll go to Guatemala, and we'll be talking to them about CRT. It may be in English, not Spanish, but we'll try to see, okay? I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michaela.